to unlock the secrets of the Gaul. This film has never been seen before, and few knew of its existence. It records the last voyage of the Hull super trawler, the Gaul, in the winter of 1974. The Gaul was one of the most modern fishing boats in the world. She had every up-to-date safety feature and was considered virtually unsinkable. Yet just days after this film was shot, in a force 9 gale in the Arctic seas some 60 miles north of Norway, she vanished. No mayday was sent and no bodies were found. 36 crewmen were lost without trace.
My mum picked the paper up and she said, "Oh, there's a trawler missing." She said, "I read it on the placards in town this afternoon." And then when she read it, she noticed she'd had a ship.
My dad should never have been on that ship. He'd signed on another one. And then he'd signed off and signed back on because he wanted to be with all his mates. And that's how we went with all his mates.
You just need to know. And I don't think that's what a lot of people understand. You know, they've been for so long.
We just want to know. After 23 years, we have a right to know.
In those 23 years, the Hull fishing industry has been decimated, but the families who lost men on the Gaul are still waiting for an answer to their questions. How and where did their loved ones die? But still, the authorities refuse to do the thing that might make an answer possible. They refuse to look for the wreck. As recently as last year, the Ministry of Defence said,
"Because of the limited information about the Gaul's position when she went down, it would be necessary to search hundreds, probably thousands of square miles of seabed." The area is renowned for bad weather and littered with wartime and other wrecks. A search would inevitably cost a great deal in both time and money. In the circumstances, it would not be possible to divert Ministry of Defence resources to such an exercise.
but is the MOD telling the truth? Or could there be another explanation for the government's reluctance to locate the wreck? Could there be something in the relatives' growing conviction that the government has something to hide? Hammerfest, Norway, a fishing town some 250 miles beyond the Arctic Circle. We've come here to investigate rumours that shortly after the Gaul was lost, a Norwegian trawler, the Riro, had reported a sonar reading showing an obstruction on the seabed, some 60 miles to the north of Norway.
This is the original chart.
One of the crew who located that obstacle was a young Englishman.
Obviously, we thought we should notify somebody, and the skipper did contact some authorities. I'm not quite sure who it was, but they got a very cool response. There's no real interest shown for the fact that we might have found a goal.
So what's going on? We begin to compile reports from other ships too. Some are sonar readings, others instances of trawls caught in obstacles on the seabed. The positions are widely scattered, many several miles distant, but they are enough for us to construct a possible search area, several kilometres square and in an area of inhospitable sea some 1,000 feet deep. Could the wreck of the Gaul really be in this area? There's only one way to find out. To do this job, considered too expensive for the British Navy, we link up with a small group of Norwegian deep-sea specialists who've transformed a former ferry, the Risøy, into a state-of-the-art underwater survey vessel. With bad weather forecast, there's only a short window of opportunity, almost certainly our last chance before the harsh storms of winter. We set sail for our target, the Arctic seas to the far north of Norway. We've brought several passengers with us, including Mason Redfern and Walter Lewis, two of Hull's most experienced former skippers. And Carol Radford, who lost her brother on the Gaul.
More or less every day of your life you sort of, think about them and think, well, I would just wonder where they are.
Her husband Jack was a crew member on the Gaul's second last voyage.
I lost 3 good personal friends, and then there must have been half the crew on it that I sailed with the trip before. It was also good shipmates.
The next morning, after some anxious moments, the weather begins to calm. It looks like a search will be possible. Christian Lissom goes down to supervise the preparations for the launch of a device called a side-scan sonar, with which we will map the seabed below in search of any readings which could indicate a wreck. We are now in the heart of the Barents Sea, an area whose location has developed an increasing significance in this mystery. Because when the Gaul was lost, these appropriately Arctic seas lay at the heart of the Cold War tensions between West and East. Here, both above and below water, the nuclear forces of NATO played their deadly game of tig with the Soviet Northern Fleet. It was not surprising then that this place held a particular fascination for military intelligence gatherers of the West and the East.
You must know the strategy of that time. First of all, we had very important bases in Murmansk and Archangel, particularly in Murmansk. Secondly, one of the schemes of the possible nuclear war was through the Northern Pole. And the idea was that our submarines with nuclear missiles will go to the north, and this is the shortest way to hit America. I think it would be foolish not to spy in this strategic area. If I were the British MI6 man, I would spy there, of course.
By midday, we've reached the fishing banks in the heart of this Cold War battleground, and the crew prepare to launch the towfish containing the side-scan sonar. It was here that the Gaul vanished, but could there be a Cold War connection? Inevitably, in the absence of any other explanation, suspicions grew. In the days and weeks that followed the loss, the relatives became aware of a strange and persistent rumour. A rumour suggesting that some Hull trawlers, and perhaps even the Gaul herself, had been involved in spying on Soviet activities in the Barents Sea. The reaction of the authorities was emphatic. The official inquiry dismissed the suggestion, and Bill Rogers, then a defence minister, said, "I can assure you that the British trawler fleet is not involved in any way in intelligence gathering." The trouble is that, as we have established, that is simply untrue. For 30 years, these former Hull skippers, Mason Redfern and Walter Lewis, kept a secret, which makes a mockery of that government denial. They even kept it from each other, until now. For years, they spied for the British.
Well, I was approached by the owner of the ships I was sailing in, and introduced to a commander, a naval commander, and he asked us if I would do this spying.
I don't know if it's the same commander, but it was a naval commander who approached me in the office and instructed me to, I won't say requested, instructed me to take whatever photographs I could in those regions.
Redfern was even sent on a week-long training course.
We were taken to London, put up in a hotel, and then I was given the time to meet the commander under the clock, just outside Victoria Station. A big black limousine arrived, and he introduced me to the two guys in the back, And from that day we were picked up at a different spot and taken to Gravesend. He used to tell me, you know, take photographs of aerials on the other ships or radars. And there were merchant ships or unloading cargo and things.
At the end of the training course, they issued him with a camera specially designed for photo reconnaissance.
You can wind it up and it'll take about 48 shots rapidly. You can just take as many as you want. Every trip I went to the Barents Sea, if I saw a Russian ship, I would take a photograph. Radar systems, any guided missile systems. Numbers were the main because they kept changing them.
And did they give you any means of identifying particular ships?
Yes, we gave me identification books on. These are cruisers, Russian cruisers.
And, oh, here we have...
And I've marked some of them off when I've seen them in town.
These are ones that you've seen here?
Yeah.
The Northern Fleet was the pride of the Soviet Navy. To this day, its bases on the freezing seas around Murmansk and Severomorsk remain closed to the west, their entrance guarded by the looming bulk of Kildene Island.
When they were having manoeuvres, I could tow right into the 12 mile off Kildene Island, and I could watch them coming down from the fjord from Murmansk, and they used to go behind Kildene to wait for the following morning, and I used to be fishing there waiting. Maybe 6 o'clock they would all come out.
Now, we had here the hunter-killer submarines which would come out here and presumably right down
into the Atlantic.
Into the Atlantic. And you also had the nuclear submarines which would wait in this area, from where they could fire ballistic missiles over the pole to America. It's almost impossible to imagine somewhere in the Cold War more dangerous.
I don't think well, at the time we didn't think nothing of it, but now we're finding out it was very, very dangerous what we were doing, or asked to do by the government.
With the side-scan sonar deployed 800 feet below, the search for the Gaul begins in earnest. We start the laborious process of slowly trawling up and down in a grid pattern designed to cover every inch of our 7 square kilometre search area. In the cramped control room, the side-scan operator Christian Lissam and Dr. Chris Davis of Cardiff University's Maritime Studies Department carefully examine the sonar printout.
It's very hit and miss, but the important thing is that you get total coverage of the seabed.
So we could be at this for hours, yeah?
Yes.
It's on the sonar that we'll first detect any signs of a wreck. For some of those on board who have lived for 23 years with the loss of the Gaul, this is a difficult and poignant moment.
Yeah, there's my brother. He was 23. He was real happy-go-lucky. He sort of lived for the day. I remember as he was older, when he was going to sea, when he came home laughing.
Very good ship, the Gaul. Very, very good. The best I've ever sailed in. And I've sailed in quite a few. And, you know, I would have staked my life on it. She would take anything she was thrown at her.
And for former skippers Redfern and Lewis, there's an additional poignancy. This is the first time they've returned to the spying grounds since they retired.
I just thought it was my job as a true Brit. Thought no more of it.
At the time we didn't think much of it, really, what we was doing.
Ignorance is bliss, isn't it? We thought there was no danger.
But the danger was real.
Because as we've established, Soviet intelligence knew from the beginning that the British were using trawlers to spy. Indeed, in the Soviet naval archives here in Russia, we found this secret report from 1952.
It's addressed to Bulganin, the Soviet defense minister and Politburo member. It's copied to Stalin, and it reads, "English vessels have been carrying out systematic surveillance of our coastline, shadowing every movement by ships of the Northern Fleet and studying our vessels." The Russian suspicions were well founded. By the time the Gaul went down in 1974, shadowy figures from British naval intelligence and MI6 had created an elaborate civilian spying operation on a scale far greater than anyone has previously realized. An exercise whose day-to-day operation was coordinated in Hull by one man.
What can you tell me about this man?
God, that's my boss. That's the man who I met under the clock in London. Commander Brooks.
Commander Brooks.
Yeah.
Commander Brooks, Commander John Geoffrey Brooks, DSC MBE, operated out of a small nondescript office in what used to be the Hull headquarters of the White Fish Authority. But Commander Brooks wasn't terribly interested in white fish. He was in fact an intelligence officer, spy master to the Hull trawler fleet. Commander Brooks died in 1971, but by then the work was well established. Indeed, our evidence shows that at least 50 Hull trawlers were involved in the spying operation set up by the commander.
One tripper came home from sea and there he was, introduced himself as Commander Brooks, and had we seen any Russian naval craft exercise or anything, and if we had, could we recognise any by the silhouettes he carried?
He turned up at our office one morning and fixed us up with a very nice camera, a long-range lens. And, well, I used to fish a lot at White Sea during the summer months. And there were submarines passing nearly every day, so we just simply snapped them.
Had we been caught doing this thing, they were quite within their rights to take us away. Now then, had they have done that, whoever, would have admitted, oh, yeah, that ship was spying for us? I can't think of anyone who would have admitted that.
Indeed, during the course of making this program, we became aware of attempts by the Ministry of Defence to dissuade people from talking to us. In fact, the authorities have on occasion been so desperate to keep the operation secret that almost laughably they've even resorted to denying it to the very men carrying out the work.
One or two of us started making inquiries about this thing. The powers that be, the men in the grey suits, denied all knowledge of this. They said, who is this Commander Brooks? According to them, it never existed. It very much did so.
But while barefaced lies might work for faceless bureaucrats, they'd be less used to fishermen caught in the act of photographing the Soviet fleet. Or worse, because we have obtained details of operations in the Barents Sea which involved civilian trawlermen in missions far more compromising than just taking photographs. More than 20 years ago, following the tragic loss of the Hull trawler the Gaul, the government quickly made two things absolutely clear. The Gaul, they said, was not a spy ship, and the British trawler fleet was not involved in any way in intelligence gathering. Yet Dispatches has established that the second of those claims at least was completely untrue. This man was a scientist who worked for British intelligence in secret laboratories in Aldermaston. He was a real-life Q.
I was working on aerial systems, designing aerial systems for clandestine operations. I then moved on to the digital side of the design, and we were designing electronics for use by agents in the field. I was aware that other members of the laboratory staff, in fact, who were scientists, were in fact adopting different roles and travelling up through Norway, up to the top end of Norway, towards the Barents Sea, where I understand that they were in fact disguised, if you like, as fishermen to avoid detection.
The trouble is, of course, I mean, it was quite dangerous, particularly for civilian trawlermen who might get caught up in it.
It was dangerous, yes. Yes, I think the risk is that, and this is fairly typical, I think, of the British government, that you do tend to be on your own in these situations if you're caught.
Clearly, any civilian fisherman involved in a covert operation with military personnel would be at considerable risk. Yet we have established that such operations were a regular occurrence. We've pieced together details of just one such mission and spoken to the men involved.
I was a naval wireless operator, radio operator, specialising in interception and analysis of what I heard. The particular language that I specialised in was Russian, but others of my colleagues specialised in other languages. I travelled to the Barents Sea in a submarine, first of all, 6 different occasions. I also travelled in a trawler, hull trawler, the Arctic Galliard, celebrated my birthday in the Barents Sea in 1966.
A civilian trawler?
A civilian trawler. I was out of naval uniform.
You were effectively acting as a spy in the Barents Sea?
Effectively, yes.
The trip lasted more than 3 weeks, and on board the spymaster himself, Commander Brooks. In Hull, we found the mate on that trip, Jimmy Williams.
We were told more or less the day we landed that the next trip, Brokey was coming with us, and we were on a guaranteed earnings for the trip, so paid by whatever government department.
There was a group of 4 people went on the trawler. There was a naval commander, I believe his name was Brooks. Brookie was what he was called. There was somebody from the Foreign Office, and then there was a colleague of mine. We joined the trawler in Hull. We had some special equipment installed on there, and during the trip along the Barents Sea we intercepted, recorded, noted down anything that appeared to be of interest.
There was Russian-speaking operators, whatever you like to call them. They were on permanent listening watch all the time.
It was a fishing trip in all respects, really. The crew were fishing for fish. We were fishing for whatever radio intercepts we could find.
You, and indeed the crew, were putting yourselves at risk.
On reflection, yes, I think we probably were. Had we been stopped or had any Russians come on board, then certainly not just the 4 of us, but the other members of the crew might have been in some difficulty explaining what we were doing there.
You, of course, were military.
Yes.
They were civilians.
Yes.
What do you think about it now when you look back on it?
Well, absolute horror, because in a way I really would have liked to have known before we went what to do in the event of an emergency like that.
What's your reaction to government and Ministry of Defence denials that there was spying going on in these trawlers?
It's not unusual in the intelligence business for denials of things that have happened to be issued. And, you know, one of the old rules, I think, is deny, deny, deny. Admit nothing.
Increasingly, though, the Ministry of Defence denials are left looking profoundly implausible, particularly so now that for the first time one of the trawler owners has decided to put the record straight. Owner of the Arctic Galliard and Managing Director of Boyd Lines, Tom Boyd. Were your ships involved in spying?
Intelligence gathering, and perhaps if you say spying, yes, they were. Some specific ships were at times, yes.
How would something like the trip involving the Arctic Galliard be organised?
Well, the Navy would say they would like to be in a particular area, and would we mind carrying some personnel with the ship? It depended very much what the ship was fishing for. We had in the Galliard at the time a very, very successful place fisherman, and the place grounds were right off Murmansk. And the ship was known by the Russians to be there place fishing regularly, and probably had been boarded in the past, or certainly had a pretty good eye cast over her to see that she was fishing and there was fish on deck, etc., etc. So the ships were chosen in that manner.
A bit risky, though.
Yes, probably. Yeah. Yes. No doubt there is some risk, yes.
So what would happen if a British trawler was sailing close to Soviet territorial waters, with naval personnel on board and with equipment on board?
Anything. They could be even shot. you see, simply sunk, and this is all, because it is a violation of our waters, you know. But I think at that time, our military in 71, 74, were very much afraid of the political consequences. Therefore, I think that they would think first before shooting and sinking the ship. But it could be arrested, stopped, searched, and a spy scandal could be made out of it.
And there were narrow escapes, as when the Arctic galliard set off again for the seas off Murmansk, specially equipped and carrying a team of 4 intelligence operatives, including Commander Brooks. Because one day, not far from Murmansk, her trawl became stuck fast undersea, and just as they tried to free her, a large Russian warship approached. One of the crew members on that trip, Sidney Withers, remembers it well.
All the men was lined round it, and the captain, I don't know, just shouted in plain English, "Can we assist you, Captain, off the fastening?" And we couldn't get off it. For some bloody reason we couldn't. And anyway, we waited while the tide took us off it, you know, a different direction. But in between that, the operators and the commander and them, they was running about, frightened to death. There was going down the engine room, burning all the papers. And I think they had some equipment where they put cameras and all like that in to sync if it come to it, you know, where it took over the side. And one says, what will happen to you? Hold the torch here and send you, you know. So I says to him, well, I'll tell you one, you won't have to torch you, mate. Because I said, you, and you, I said, are the spies, I'll tell them.
So where does all that stand beside the claims of the government at the time, outlined by Bill Rogers, then Defence Minister, in a letter to a local MP?
The British trawler fleet is not involved in any way in intelligence gathering. This applies as much to equipment as to personnel.
We went back to Bill Rogers, now Lord Rogers, and presented him with our evidence.
Looking at that letter and knowing the way I behaved as a minister, I think simply I was wrongly informed. I was seriously misled on the evidence. Now, I would have to go and look at the papers to be absolutely certain, but it certainly came as a shock to me to discover the fleet had been involved in systematic intelligence gathering, and I would regard this as a very serious shortcoming if what appears to have happened had happened, and I was knowingly misled to the extent that I said that the trawler fleet were not engaged in intelligence gathering. I mean, that is the one point which is palpably on the evidence not true. I think it's always very serious if officials mislead ministers. It's important that the intelligence services should be under political control, under the control of ministers, but if I was misled, I would take a very, very serious view indeed.
Ironically, the local MP to whom Rogers wrote that letter is now the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott. He declined to be interviewed for this programme, but said the government would welcome and consider any new evidence that the programme can provide. The Ministry of Defence, in a statement to dispatches, denied that the Gaul had been involved in spying. They did admit that
a very limited number of vessels assisted the government in specific intelligence gathering.
But when asked where this left Lord Rogers' original claim that the trawler fleet was not involved in intelligence gathering, they said,
in context, in 1974, it was a correct statement. We stand by it.
We've been searching with the side-scan sonar now for 6 hours, and still we've found nothing which might be the wreck of the Gaul. Meanwhile, the sea is rising, and that's a problem. If we don't find a wreck soon, then the swell could make it impossible to use the remotely operated dive vehicle which carries our cameras. But then, at last, there's a breakthrough.
Oh, I think it's coming up, something like that.
We have something coming up?
Yes, I think so.
On the echo sender?
Yeah. It's a small echo.
So could this be a wreck? We head below to the control room where we can look at the side-scan sonar printout.
So what have we got here? What's happening?
Well, it's obviously something that's raised off the seabed, which is throwing quite a strong shadow. We're getting a ghost of it on the port side. So we've more or less had the towfish pass more or less over it.
This is very good news, although for Carol Radford it brings mixed feelings.
If we find the Gaul, what effect will it have?
I think it'd be sad, but it will put a lot of people's minds at rest. It would sort of make you feel better in the end, I think. You know, the actual finding and it all coming about again would be awful, but it would help. It would help a lot.
But to find out if this is indeed the Gaul, we're going to have to anchor and send down a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. But we must move fast. The swell is continuing to rise, and if the seas get any higher, they could snap the ROV's umbilical cable, through which we control its movements and its cameras. Nearly 1,000 feet below the Arctic seas, some 60 miles to the north of Norway, we have found a sonar reading which could indicate a wreck. But is it the Gaul? Carol Radford, who lost her brother in the tragedy, waits anxiously. We've no idea what we might find, but we can expect that a ship which has been capsized by heavy seas will have suffered serious damage to its superstructure. And one that has then fallen nearly 1,000 feet may even have virtually disintegrated on hitting the seabed.
The forward end of the ROV, there's a little sonar that goes round and round, rather like a radar screen in miniature. And what that will be doing is to orientate the ROV towards the wreck.
How far down is the ROV now?
It's about 230 metres down, so it's got just over 30 metres to get to the bottom. Wreck will come up as an image on the screen at some location, so then you can use the controls to home in onto the wreck.
We must be now getting fairly near the bottom?
We're very near to the bottom at the moment, yes.
We're about 160 meters from the wreck. That's a good image of the wreck. Going in on the wreck now, we're just about 6 meters away.
6 meters away?
Yes. So the wreck will soon appear in the lights now.
And we're going to approach the wreck amidships?
Yes. There's a row coming into the ship now.
That's the ship?
Yes.
And that looks like nets.
Yes, it's going to be a troll, bit of a troll. The problem is that is a lot of old trolls, maybe from other fishing boats. So now we pull carefully back again. We are approaching very carefully so that we are sure that we're not getting stuck to something, you know.
Our first priority is to find the name on the bow.
We suppose that this is a bow. We don't know. But then we will try to go on the bow and go up.
And follow along and see if we can find the name.
Yes, or maybe an edge on top here which we can find.
So we're a little bit nearer, but we're not quite there yet.
Well, we check out now and go for another try.
She looks as if she's slightly over on the starboard side.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So we should come to
5. That's a short one, yeah?
Yeah, we'll
5.
We'll come down to the name, so...
The name will start soon now.
The problem is that the Gaul was originally named the Ranger Castor, and her new name, simply painted on top of the old one, might not have survived.
Hole here.
Back.
Just that. There we are. It's laser.
Gaul. G-A.
You had Gaul.
Yeah, Gaul.
Gaul.
We have Gaul. Gaul.
Gaul.
Okay.
So we found the Gaul. which the authorities said couldn't be done.
But for final proof, we would prefer to find the original manufacturer's nameplate, the Ranger caster.
We could follow this rail again backwards, you know, on this corner we've been, and then we are on the bridge.
Spare anchor is here. Here, I should say.
It's here, yeah. It's right
so
here.
that we're now looking down here.
Right, there's
Pretty well ahead of us, we have the bridge.
Yes.
Here's the bridge.
There's the bridge.
You can see the glass. Yeah.
We can see.
Glass in the bridge.
The glass is still in the bridge?
Yes.
And
Well,
not broken?
We cannot tell yet. So we can count the windows in the bridge. 1, 2, 3, 4.
There's the center window.
And the glass is still there?
And it's still in.
That's
Storm window.
Then we can
And
see
here
the
is
plate.
a building plate.
Brook Marine. Ranger caster, Brook Marine.
Complete confirmation.
My mother, before she died, she'd always said if ever we found out where it was, if we would let her know. I can't begin to understand why they looked for it. They've let all these families suffer and be upset, and they could have stopped it and just put everybody out of the misery. They've caused so much heartache with all the people in Hull, and it's just unnecessary.
And so we are forced to leave by the threat of worsening weather. But our main mission has been accomplished. We've found the Gaul. The authorities can no longer hide behind claims that to do so would be too expensive or too difficult. Instead, they must answer some very uncomfortable questions. Like, why did they claim the area is littered with wrecks when the nearest one is nearly 40 nautical miles away? And why did they apparently ignore Norwegian reports of the wreck? And how do they explain the testimony of this man, a serviceman on the aircraft carrier Hermes on the original search?
The Hermes didn't find it, but the Mohawk apparently found her and reported that she'd found her.
Officially, no trace of the Gaul was found during the search, but crewmen from the Mohawk, a fisheries protection frigate, told Peterson a different story.
He was 98% sure that she'd found the wreck of the Gaul.
This is during the search, a few days after it?
A couple of days after the search.
So the authorities knew then?
They knew then, definitely.
Peterson has good cause to remember the search and to feel angry about the apparent cover-up. Because when he returned home, he discovered his father had been one of the Gaul's crew and was lost. The next day, we start to examine our videotape for clues which might explain why the Gaul sank without transmitting a Mayday distress call. The official public inquiry into the loss concluded that she had capsized and sunk because she was hit by a series of very heavy seas when she was at her most vulnerable, almost broadside to the sea. But then a 2-year study by the National Maritime Institute found she was so stable she could not have capsized due to weather alone, even broadside. They said it would need another factor as well, and suggested she must already have suffered flooding below, possibly through an open hatch. But that makes the lack of a Mayday even more surprising, because such flooding would certainly have been noticed as it built up.
The ship had become sluggish, and not only that, you can hear water, you know, the people who would have been off watch and that, they would have known, and particularly on the bridge, you know, they would have known there was something wrong with the movement of the ship.
So you find it incredible that she could have got water on the factory deck and then not had time to put out a Mayday?
Yeah, that's quite, yeah. You know, I don't accept this at all.
The NMI report did address this. Indeed, when it listed 6 likely contributing factors, it began with
damage to the bridge front by large waves, causing a loss of steerage control and radio contact.
So would we find that serious damage to the bridge of the Gaul?
There seems to be virtually no damage at all. The glass is even intact in some of these windows.
Yes.
There was no mayday. At the inquiry they suggest that there must have been some catastrophic overwhelming. You would have expected, I would have thought, much more serious damage to the bridge.
Doesn't look that destructive. There you have this storm window with the circle in, you know, the spinning window. It's still there.
And then there's the mystery of which direction the Gaul was sailing in at the time of her sinking. Both the official investigations agreed that she must have been broadside to the waves. Her former skipper, while believing the Gaul was not involved in spying, agrees that she would have had to be broadside.
Head to wind she'd have been as right as rain. That's what I've always thought.
Yet that is how we found the wreck of the Gaul, facing almost directly into the weather at that time. Further research would be required to establish how much that direction could have been affected by underwater currents as she sank. But on the face of it, our evidence suggests she came gently to rest, facing into the wind. But our pictures did reveal one final extraordinary mystery. Because when we examined the tapes again, we discovered something stranger still, not far from the wreck. A cable unlike any of the steel trawl ropes lost in the area.
Just now it has some tension because it's not laying down into the depressions in the seabed. It's quite some tension on the cable or whatever it is. It has to be attached to something in both ends or it is very long.
But does it have anything to do with the Gaul? Christian, extremely experienced in this kind of underwater work, is increasingly suspicious about what we've found.
I'm thinking that steel rope or cable has no connection with the wreck. That's my opinion. But,
it's been laid there afterwards.
It might have something with the story or something attached to the wreck, but I can't figure out the direction of it. To me, it doesn't look like a steel rope.
Certainly the cable does not look like the trawl ropes scattered elsewhere around the wreck. It's too thick and it lies differently.
If you come fast and break something, it isn't just laid on the ground because there's so much tension. It'll spring and go in different directions.
So this is a complete mystery, really.
Yeah, in a way it's a mystery, yes. To me, I mean, maybe off the record, but to me it looks like a kind of cable, a communication cable, but I've seen that before, that has been confirmed as a communication cable, but I know nothing about that in this area.
These could be communication cables?
To me it looks like it, because I couldn't see any sign that this is a steel rope.
But we're not aware of any mapped communication cables?
No.
So it's unlikely to be a known public, commercial line, but it could be perhaps a military line?
Yes, perhaps.
Christian's reluctance to commit himself was understandable. There has never been any report of a military cable in that area, until now. This is the Andøya military air base in Norway, in the early 70s the focus of a major political scandal when peace campaigners revealed that the West had laid a top-secret anti-submarine detection device on the seabed some 30 miles out to sea and linked by cable to the airbase. The system, known as SOSUS, was designed in conjunction with anti-submarine reconnaissance aircraft to monitor the passage of Russian submarines in this strategically vital area. What's never before been revealed is that around 1968, the Americans funded a far more ambitious SOSUS project. Codenamed Poker, it's remained top secret until now. According to information from Norwegian military sources, this cable began at a land station on Saraya Island and ran for around 120 nautical miles to a position approximately 50 miles to the north of North Cape, almost exactly where we found the wreck of the Gaul. So we tracked the compass bearing of the cable we'd found, and it led directly back towards Saraya, the very route the SOSUS cable must travel. So did the Gaul simply sink there by a tragic coincidence? Or could she have had a more direct involvement? Is that why the authorities have been so reluctant to search for the wreck? Or could it even be that such activities attracted the attention of the Russians?
What surprised me really was that trawler was sunk by the Russians for a normal intelligence operation like this. So I don't think that would be thinkable in the mid-70s. If they went to a step like this, there must be a much more serious or a perceived serious reason to do it.
And at that time there were few issues more serious than the deployment of the Soviet Union's new Delta submarines. For the first time, Russian submarines no longer had to leave their home seas. They could fire nuclear missiles direct from the Barents Sea over the pole into America. So if, just supposing if, the Soviet Union had something to do with the loss of the Gaul, what would you be looking for on the seabed?
Well, if you take the place of sinking into consideration, I would suspect it had something to do with submarines, submarine detection, submarine destruction. It could be placing Western systems, but it certainly also could be destruction or detection of Soviet systems for detecting submarines passing this area.
And what would these systems look like?
There could be cables, there could be buoys, or other things placed on the seafloor.
So could the mystery of the Gaul have something to do with secret underwater equipment? Could she have been involved with it in some way when the weather worsened? Was she towing some monitoring device, or even engaged in helping to lay or recover some lost equipment? Would that explain some strange images we had discovered on the side-scan sonar printouts?
To me, it looks like impacts or something, cable or steel rope that has been left on the seabed and then lifted off again.
It's impossible to tell from this what's been going on, but something has been going on.
Something has been going on, yes.
So if the Gaul was involved in whatever was going on, could that be the explanation for the most abiding mystery surrounding her loss? Could that be why she delayed transmitting a mayday until it was too late to do so? What would you say to relatives who say, we were lied to about the trawler fleet being involved in spying? Why should we believe the government when they say that the Gaul wasn't involved in spying?
I'd have a great deal of sympathy with that, because quite palpably I was wrong in what I said about the fleet not being engaged in intelligent gathering. If I was misled, I think it's for the Secretary of State to ensure that practices have changed and it won't ever happen again. I think they have every reason to feel that if I was wrong on one, I could have been wrong on the other. I think if I was Secretary of State, I would look very carefully indeed at the papers and see whether, in respect of the fate of the Gaul, I or anyone else gave a false account of what was happening. I think it's for the Secretary of State now to take an initiative and satisfy himself on these very difficult but very important issues.
Indeed, if there is one conclusion to be drawn from our investigation, it is surely that the call for a full inquiry and survey of the wreck can no longer be ignored. After 23 years, the relatives at last know the where. The government must now answer the why.
It's been a bit haunting. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of faces that I've never seen for 23 years. You know, keep coming back. So it was hurtful, I'd say. Anyway, at least a couple more days I'll be able to sleep a lot better now. I know where it is, and I'm glad that a lot of other people will know where it is and finally put it to rest.
It's really sad to sort of see it, but yeah, it's good. And it'll put a lot of people's minds at rest. And at least you can sort of say, well, we know where they are, kind of thing now. And just maybe take the memories back with you. That's it, really. Now we know where it is, we've found it. It's sad, but it's good. And I feel that we can take them all back home in our hearts, all of them, 36 of them. And we know, you know, we know where they are. There's something there then, and they can all go back home with us now.
Dispatches returns to 4 with another report next Thursday.